The council chamber stretched impossibly wide, its crystalline walls pulsing with soft blue light that had witnessed countless diplomatic sessions across millennia. Ambassador Zethka of the Valari Federation adjusted her ceremonial robes, the silver threads catching the ambient glow as she prepared for what many considered the most important gathering in galactic history. Today marked the 10,000th anniversary of First Contact, and representatives from 47 species had assembled to commemorate the moment that changed everything. The official records were clear, documented in the sacred archives of every major civilization. The Altarians had been the first to achieve faster-than-light travel, discovering the small blue-green world in what humans now call the Sol system. They had made contact with the primitive inhabitants, establishing the foundation for what would become the Galactic Council. Honored delegates, Zethka began, her voice carrying through the chamber's perfect acoustics, we gather to celebrate the wisdom of the Altarians, who 10,000 years ago extended their hand to a young species and welcomed them into our cosmic community. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled crowd. The Altarian delegation, their tall, graceful forms draped in flowing golden garments, nodded with practiced dignity. For 10 millennia, they had held the position of senior council members, their status unquestioned due to their role in humanity's integration into galactic society. At the far end of the chamber, almost hidden among the larger delegations, sat the human representative. Dr. Sarah Chen, the current human ambassador, appeared unremarkable compared to the exotic forms surrounding her. No crystalline skin like the Valari, no towering height like the Altarians, no telepathic abilities like the Mindari. Just a middle-aged woman in a simple black diplomatic uniform, her dark eyes scanning the crowd with quiet intensity. The Altarian archives tell us of their brave explorers, Zethka continued, who found humanity in its earliest stages of technological development. Cave paintings, primitive tools, basic agriculture. It was the Altarians who gifted humanity with knowledge, who lifted them from ignorance and welcomed them as the 47th member species of our great alliance. High Counselor Velthran of the Altarians rose gracefully, his ancient features serene. We are honored by this recognition, he said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. The Altarian people have always believed in nurturing younger species, in sharing the gifts of knowledge and wisdom. Humanity's remarkable progress is testament to their natural ability, guided by our patient teaching. More murmurs of approval. The story was well known, taught in schools across 47 worlds. Humanity's rapid advancement from primitive cave dwellers to spacefaring civilization was held up as the perfect example of what could be achieved when an advanced species took a younger one under their protection. Dr. Chen shifted in her seat, a small movement that somehow drew attention despite its subtlety. Her expression remained neutral, but something in her posture suggested she was listening to the proceedings with particular interest. Today, Zethka announced, we celebrate not just First Contact, but the model it established. The Altarian approach has become the standard for all subsequent First Contact protocols. When we discover new species, we remember the wisdom shown 10,000 years ago. The chamber erupted in polite applause. Representatives from dozens of species joined in the celebration, their various forms of approval creating a symphony of clicks, chirps, harmonic tones, and traditional clapping. The sound echoed off the crystalline walls, building to a crescendo that seemed to vibrate through the very structure of the space station. As the applause died down, an unexpected voice cut through the lingering echoes. I'm sorry, but there's been a mistake. All eyes turned to Dr. Chen, who had risen from her seat. Her voice was calm, conversational even, but it carried clearly through the sudden silence that had fallen over the chamber. Zethka blinked in confusion, her blue-tinted features showing surprise. Ambassador Chen, surely any corrections to the historical record can be discussed in private session. No, Dr. Chen said, stepping forward into the center of the chamber. This correction needs to be made here, now, in front of everyone. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of delegates who suddenly seemed much more attentive. The Altarians didn't make first contact with humanity 10,000 years ago. High Counselor Velthran's composed expression flickered for just a moment. Ambassador Chen, I understand that humans sometimes struggle with accepting their humble origins, but the historical record is quite clear. Dr. Chen smiled, and there was something in that smile that made several delegates lean forward in their seats. Oh, first contact definitely happened 10,000 years ago. But the Altarians weren't the ones who made it. The silence in the chamber was now absolute. Even the soft humming of the life support system seemed muted. Zethka found herself gripping the edge of her podium. What exactly are you suggesting, Ambassador? Dr. Chen reached into her diplomatic case and withdrew a small device that most delegates recognized as a standard holographic projector. She placed it on the chamber floor and activated it with a simple gesture. The hologram that materialized was unlike anything the delegates had expected. It showed not the crude cave paintings or primitive settlements that were typically associated with ancient humanity, but something far more sophisticated. The image displayed a vast structure, clearly artificial, rising from what appeared to be Earth's surface. The architecture was unlike anything in the current galactic database. "This is the Terran Deep Space Communications Array," Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying a hint of pride. "Built 9,700 years ago. 300 years after first contact." More holograms appeared, showing images that challenged everything the delegates thought they knew about human history. Cities that seemed to blend organic and technological elements. Spacecraft with designs that were neither crude nor primitive. Humans working alongside technology that appeared sophisticated by any standard. "You see, Dr. Chen continued, humans were already a spacefaring civilization when the Altarians arrived. We'd been exploring our local stellar neighborhood for nearly 500 years. We had colonies on 6 worlds and had made contact with 3 other species." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Several delegates began speaking at once, their voices rising in pitch and volume. Zethka raised her hands for silence, but it took several minutes for order to be restored. High Counselor Velthran stood again, his composure notably less perfect than before. "These images, they must be fabrications. Our archives clearly show." "Your archives show what you were told," Dr. Chen interrupted gently. "And you were told a very careful story." She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show what appeared to be an Altarian vessel approaching a blue world. 10,000 years ago, an Altarian exploration fleet did arrive at Earth. But they weren't making first contact. They were responding to our invitation. The word invitation hung in the air like a physical presence. No delegate could recall ever hearing of a younger species inviting contact from an older one. The very concept seemed to contradict everything they understood about how galactic civilization worked. Dr. Chen touched the projector again, and the display shifted to show text in multiple languages. "This is the message humanity broadcast into space 10,012 years ago. It was transmitted in 17 different mathematical languages, designed to be comprehensible to any technological civilization." As the text scrolled past, several delegates with linguistic expertise began translating in real time, their voices creating a babble of interpretation. But the general meaning was clear even without translation. It was an invitation to peaceful contact, a greeting extended to whoever might be listening among the stars. The message included our coordinates, our basic technological capabilities, and an invitation to open diplomatic relations, Dr. Chen explained. The Altarian fleet received this transmission and responded. They came to Earth not as discoverers, but as guests. Zethka felt as though the chamber was spinning around her. "But the official records, the primitive conditions your species was found in." Dr. Chen's smile grew wider, and now there was definitely something predatory in it. "Oh, we were very careful about the conditions the Altarians found us in. You see, we'd learned something interesting from our contact with those other 3 species. Something that made us very cautious about how we presented ourselves to newcomers." She gestured again, and the hologram showed what appeared to be the aftermath of some sort of conflict. Destroyed cities, scarred landscapes, the remnants of what had clearly been an advanced civilization. "The Krex Empire," Dr. Chen said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "They were our second contact, after the peaceful Banari. The Krex saw our technology, our resources, our strategic position. They decided that humanity would make excellent servants." The holographic display showed scenes of battle, but not the primitive spear and sword combat the delegates might have expected. These were clearly technological conflicts, with energy weapons and spacecraft engaged in what could only be described as warfare. "The war lasted 8 years, Dr. Chen continued. In the end, we won. But we learned a valuable lesson about how some species react to discovering a newcomer with potentially useful capabilities." She touched the projector one more time, and the display returned to showing the Altarian fleet approaching Earth. "So when we received the Altarian response to our invitation, we made a decision. We would present ourselves as exactly what they expected to find. A primitive species, worthy of protection rather than conquest. The implications of her words were staggering. Several delegates began speaking at once, but Dr. Chen held up her hand for silence. For 10,000 years, humanity has played the role of the grateful junior partner. We've accepted the patronizing guidance, the careful supervision, the limitations placed on our expansion and development. We've allowed ourselves to be held up as the model of what an advanced species can accomplish when they take a primitive one under their wing. Her eyes found High Counselor Velthran, who was staring at her with an expression that had moved far beyond mere surprise. We've been very good students, haven't we, High Counselor? Always grateful, always eager to learn, always careful not to advance too quickly or show too much independence. The silence that followed was deafening. 47 species sat frozen, trying to process information that overturned 10 millennia of accepted history. Finally, Zethka found her voice. You're claiming that humanity has been deceiving the entire galactic community for 10,000 years? Dr. Chen nodded calmly. We prefer to think of it as playing a necessary role. But, yes, that's exactly what I'm claiming. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who were staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to something approaching fear. The question now, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the absolute silence, is what happens next. Because the performance is over. Humanity is ready to take its true place in galactic civilization. As her words echoed through the crystalline chamber, 46 species began to understand that everything they thought they knew about the balance of power in the galaxy had just changed forever. The emergency session convened 3 hours after Dr. Chen's revelation, though it felt like years had passed in the interim. The main council chamber had been cleared, replaced by a secure conference room deep within the station's core. Only the senior representatives from each major power block were present, their faces reflecting various degrees of shock, suspicion, and carefully controlled anger. High Counselor Velthran sat at the head of the curved table, his usually pristine golden robe slightly rumpled. For the first time in centuries, the Altarian leader appeared genuinely rattled. Across from him, Dr. Chen occupied her seat with the same calm demeanor she'd displayed during her announcement, as though she'd just commented on the weather rather than upended galactic history. You will provide proof, declared Commander Grex 9 of the Hegemony, his metallic voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The cybernetic being's optical sensors glowed red as they focused on the human representative. These claims are extraordinary and require extraordinary evidence. Dr. Chen nodded respectfully. Of course, Commander. I would expect nothing less from beings of your intelligence. She placed a new device on the table, larger than the holographic projector she'd used earlier. This contains 10,000 years of carefully maintained records. Everything we've preserved about our true history, our actual technological development, and our real activities during the period you've known us as your grateful pupils. Ambassador Silneth of the Mind Collective leaned forward, her silver eyes glowing with psychic energy. You claim to have deceived species with telepathic capabilities. The Mindari have interacted with humans for millennia. We would have detected such an elaborate deception. The human ambassador's smile was patient, almost sympathetic. Ambassador Silneth, your people's telepathic abilities are indeed remarkable. However, they work on the principle of reading surface thoughts and emotional states. What would you detect from a person who genuinely believed they were telling the truth about humanity's primitive origins? The implications of her words sent a chill through the room. Silnetha's expression shifted to something approaching alarm. You're suggesting that your own people were kept ignorant of their true history? Not ignorant, Dr. Chen corrected. Compartmentalized. For 10,000 years, humanity has maintained a dual civilization. The majority of our population has lived exactly as you've observed. Grateful, learning, slowly advancing under careful supervision. They've genuinely believed the story you've been told because, for them, it was true. She activated the device, and holographic displays filled the air around the table. The images showed human settlements, but not the ones familiar to the galactic community. These were vast, clearly advanced installations hidden on the far sides of moons, in asteroid belts, within the rings of gas giants. Meanwhile, a carefully selected portion of our population has maintained our true technological base, Dr. Chen continued. Hidden colonies, advanced research facilities, military installations that have continued to develop and expand throughout the entire period of our supposed guided development. President General Koth of the warrior clan slammed his massive fist on the table, causing several smaller delegates to flinch. You speak of military installations. Are you threatening the council? Dr. Chen's expression didn't change. I'm explaining our history, President General. Whether you choose to interpret that as a threat says more about your own intentions than ours. She gestured, and the display shifted to show what appeared to be a tactical assessment of the galactic military situation. Ship counts, technological capabilities, strategic positions. The numbers were staggering, and they painted a picture that made several delegates reach for their emergency communicators. Stop, High Counselor Velthran said sharply. Do not contact your fleets. Not yet. His ancient eyes fixed on Dr. Chen with an intensity that seemed to pierce through her calm exterior. What do you want? The question hung in the air like a blade. Every delegate in the room understood that they had just shifted from a commemorative ceremony to what might be the most important negotiation in galactic history. Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. What we want is simple, High Counselor. We want the truth to be acknowledged. We want humanity to take its rightful place as an equal member of galactic civilization. No more patronizing guidance. No more careful supervision. No more being held up as an example of what primitive species can achieve with proper mentoring. And if the Council refuses, asked Trade Coordinator Vel 9 of the Commerce Guild, her crystalline features flickering with nervous energy. Dr. Chen's smile became almost gentle. Then, we'll be very disappointed. You see, we've grown quite fond of many of you over the past 10 millennia. The deception wasn't born of malice, but of necessity. We'd much rather continue our relationships on a foundation of truth and mutual respect. Commander Grex 9 censors word as they analyzed the data streaming from Dr. Chen's device. These ship configurations, they're unlike anything in our databases. Your technology has diverged significantly from standard galactic patterns. 10,000 years of independent development will do that, Dr. Chen agreed. When you're forced to work in secret, you tend to find creative solutions to problems. We've made advances that might surprise you. She gestured again, and the display showed what appeared to be a new type of faster-than-light drive. The energy signatures were unlike anything the assembled delegates had seen. The Heisenberg Quantum Fold Drive, Dr. Chen explained. We developed it about 3,000 years ago, but we've been very careful about where we've used it. Travel time between distant galaxies drops from months to days. We've already established diplomatic contact with 17 civilizations beyond the local group. The silence that followed was profound. The implications were staggering. If humanity had access to other galactic civilizations, the balance of power had shifted in ways that were only beginning to become clear. Ambassador Silnetha's voice was barely a whisper. How many ships? Dr. Chen consulted a display that materialized in front of her. Currently operational? About 40,000 major vessels. But production capacity has been ramping up significantly since we made the decision to reveal ourselves. We should be able to double that number within the next standard year. President General Koth stood abruptly, his massive frame radiating threat. 40,000 ships? The combined fleets of the major powers barely exceed 30,000 vessels. Please sit down, President General, Dr. Chen said calmly. You're frightening the others, and there's really no need for dramatics. The fact that a human was giving orders to one of the most feared military commanders in the galaxy was not lost on anyone present. Even more unsettling was the fact that Koth, after a moment of visible internal struggle, actually complied. High Counselor Velthran had been studying the holographic displays with increasing intensity. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made everyone in the room pay attention. Show us the Krex War. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. I was hoping you'd ask about that. The display shifted to show detailed battle recordings, tactical analyses, casualty reports. It was clear that this had been no minor skirmish between primitive civilizations. The Krex Empire had been a major galactic power 8,000 years ago, controlling over 200 systems and possessing technology that was advanced even by current standards. The war record showed a conflict of staggering scope and intensity. They came to Earth expecting to find a useful client species, Dr. Chen narrated as the displays showed massive fleets approaching the Sol system. What they found was a civilization that had been preparing for exactly this possibility. The battle footage was unlike anything the delegates had seen. Human ships moved with tactics that were completely unfamiliar, using strategies that seemed to anticipate and counter every move their opponents made. The technology on display was clearly advanced, but it was the tactical brilliance that was most striking. The war ended when we destroyed their home system, Dr. Chen said matter-of-factly. Not just their fleet or their military installations. The entire system. We collapsed their star. The casual way she delivered this information sent shock waves through the room. Stellar engineering was considered a theoretical field by most galactic civilizations. The idea that humanity had actually weaponized it 8,000 years ago was beyond troubling. Commander Grex 9's optical sensors dimmed as his processors struggled to integrate this information. You committed genocide. Dr. Chen's expression became serious for the first time since the session began. We defended ourselves against a species that intended to enslave our entire population. The Krex Empire had a documented history of doing exactly that to 14 other civilizations. We made certain they would never threaten anyone again. She paused, letting the implications sink in. That's when we made the decision to go into hiding. We realized that our natural approach to warfare was unsettling to other species. The Benari, our first peaceful contact, actually severed diplomatic relations with us after learning what we'd done to the Krex. Trade Coordinator Vel 9's crystalline features had taken on a distinctly pale hue. The disappearance of the Krex Empire, that's been a historical mystery for 8 millennia. Every major civilization has theories about what happened to them. No mystery, Dr. Chan replied. They attacked the wrong species. The room fell silent again as the delegates absorbed this information. The historical records would have to be completely revised. A major galactic power hadn't simply collapsed or faded away. They had been systematically eliminated by a species that was supposedly primitive at the time. Ambassador Silnath had been quietly using her telepathic abilities to probe the edges of Dr. Chen's mind throughout the session. Now she spoke with a voice that carried a note of genuine fear. Your surface thoughts are calm, controlled, rational. But, underneath. She paused, her silver eyes wide. I can sense something vast and patient. Like looking into the depths of an ocean. How long have you been planning this revelation? Dr. Chen's smile returned, but now it carried a different quality. We've been debating whether to reveal ourselves for about 6,000 years. The decision to do so was made approximately 50 years ago, when we completed our analysis of current galactic political stability. We determined that the major powers had achieved a sufficient balance that the introduction of a new variable wouldn't necessarily trigger a catastrophic war. A new variable, High Counselor Velthran repeated slowly. You're referring to yourselves as a variable in galactic politics. Well, yes, Dr. Chen said, as though this should be obvious. We're patient by nature, but we're not passive. We've been watching, learning, evaluating. We understand the political dynamics, the economic pressures, the military balances that keep galactic civilization stable. We've been very careful to choose our moment. She gestured, and the display showed a complex analysis of current galactic politics. Trade routes, military deployments, economic dependencies, political alliances. It was clear that humanity had been conducting incredibly sophisticated intelligence-gathering operations for millennia. We know which species are natural allies, which are potential threats, and which are simply looking for the best opportunity to advance their own interests, Dr. Chen continued. We know about the secret military buildups, the economic warfare, the territorial disputes that haven't been made public. We know about the hegemony's plans for expansion into the Outer Rim, and the Commerce Guild's efforts to manipulate currency exchanges to destabilize emerging markets. The accuracy of her information was evident from the expressions around the table. Every major power had secrets they thought were carefully hidden, and it was clear that humanity knew about all of them. President General Koth leaned forward, his massive frame tense. What game are you playing, human? Dr. Chan met his gaze without flinching. No game, President General. We're simply tired of pretending to be something we're not. The masquerade served its purpose, but it's no longer necessary. Humanity is ready to engage with galactic civilization as equals. Equals? Commander Grex 9's voice carried a note of disbelief. You've hidden your true nature for 10,000 years. You've deceived every major power in the galaxy. You've admitted to committing genocide. And now you expect to be welcomed as equals? Dr. Chen considered this for a moment. I expect you to be realistic about your options, Commander. Humanity exists. We're here, we're technologically advanced, and we're not going away. You can choose to work with us as partners, or you can choose to see us as threats. But you can't choose to go back to seeing us as primitive pupils who need your guidance. The stark simplicity of her logic was unsettling. The galactic community suddenly found itself faced with a completely new player, one that had been observing and preparing while everyone else believed they knew exactly what humanity was capable of. High Counselor Velthran stood slowly, his ancient frame seeming to carry the weight of centuries. This session is adjourned. Each delegation will return to their governments to report these developments. We will reconvene in one standard week to discuss how to proceed. As the delegates began to file out, Dr. Chen remained seated, watching them with calm interest. When only she and the High Counselor remained, Velthran turned to face her. Was any of it real? He asked quietly. The gratitude, the eager learning, the friendship our peoples have shared? Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. All of it was real, High Counselor. The people you've interacted with, the relationships you've built, the genuine progress we've made together. None of that was a lie. We simply haven't told you the whole truth about who we are. She stood and gathered her devices. The question now is whether you can accept us as we really are, rather than as you thought we were. As she walked toward the exit, Velthran called after her. What if we can't? What if the Council decides that humanity poses too great a threat to galactic stability? Dr. Chen paused at the doorway and looked back with an expression that was equal parts sad and determined. Then, you'll discover that our capacity for warfare has improved considerably over the past 8,000 years. The door closed behind her, leaving the ancient Altarian leader alone with the knowledge that everything he thought he knew about the galaxy had just changed forever. The week that followed Dr. Chen's revelation would later be remembered as the longest 7 days in galactic history. Across 46 worlds, emergency sessions convened, military advisors whispered urgent briefings to shocked leaders, and intelligence agencies scrambled to verify claims that seemed impossible yet were supported by increasingly undeniable evidence. On the massive trading station of Epsilon 7, Ambassador Zethka found herself in the uncomfortable position of briefing the Valari Federation's high command via quantum communicator. The holographic faces of her superiors flickered in the secure chamber, their blue-tinted features etched with concern. The economic implications alone are staggering, reported Finance Minister Kelthon, his normally steady voice carrying notes of strain. If humanity has been maintaining hidden colonies and advanced manufacturing capabilities for 10 millennia, our entire understanding of resource distribution and economic capacity is fundamentally flawed. Supreme Commander Yethare leaned forward in her projection, her tactical mind clearly working through scenarios. Ambassador, you observed this Dr. Chen directly. What was your assessment of her psychological state? Any indication of deception or delusion? Zethka had been dreading this question. Supreme Commander, I've been analyzing xenopsychology for over 3 centuries. Dr. Chen displayed none of the typical markers of deception. Her biometric readings remained stable throughout even the most extraordinary claims. Either she's telling the truth, or humans have developed deception capabilities far beyond anything we've encountered. The silence from her superiors was telling. Finally, High Chancellor Vexemo spoke, his ancient voice carrying the weight of authority. What is the current status of human diplomatic activity? That's perhaps the most unsettling aspect, Zethka replied. Dr. Chen returned to normal diplomatic duties the day after her announcement. She attended the routine trade negotiations, participated in the cultural exchange planning session, and had lunch with several junior ambassadors from various species. She's acting as though she simply cleared up a minor historical misunderstanding. Indeed, Dr. Chen's behavior in the days following her revelation had been almost aggressively normal. She'd shown up to scheduled meetings, filed her routine reports, and maintained the same friendly but professional demeanor she'd displayed for decades. The only difference was a subtle change in how other diplomats interacted with her. Conversations that had once been casual and relaxed now carried an undercurrent of tension that everyone felt but no one acknowledged. On the industrial world of Gamma Foundries, Commander Grex-9 was conducting his own investigation into humanity's claims. The cybernetic being had spent 72 continuous hours analyzing the data Dr. Chen had provided, cross-referencing it with hegemony intelligence databases and running probability assessments that pushed his quantum processors to their limits. The results were disturbing. Analysis complete, he reported to the Hegemony War Council, his metallic voice carrying unusual modulations that indicated stress on his systems. Probability of deception, 12.7%. Probability of partial truth with strategic omissions, 31.2%. Probability of complete accuracy, 56.1%. Grand Marshal Rex Alpha's red optical sensors flared brighter. Explain the variance in assessment. The data provided shows consistency across multiple verification methods. Chronological sequences align with known galactic events. Technological development patterns follow logical progression curves. Most significantly, previously unexplained phenomena in our historical records now have plausible explanations when viewed through the lens of covert human activity. Commander Grex 9 activated a holographic display showing a tactical map of the galaxy. Red markers appeared at dozens of locations, indicating anomalous events from the past 10,000 years that had never been satisfactorily explained. The disappearance of deep space monitoring stations along the outer rim, attributed to equipment failures. Solar anomalies in uninhabited systems that suggested artificial interference. Gravitational disturbances in asteroid fields that implied large-scale mining operations. Long-range sensor shadows that we categorized as natural phenomena. The markers formed patterns that were unmistakable once pointed out. Hidden supply routes, concealed bases, clandestine research facilities. The scope of the operation was staggering. Secondary analysis indicates that if human claims are accurate, their actual industrial capacity exceeds the combined output of the three largest manufacturing worlds in hegemony space, Grex 9 continued. Their military potential. He paused, his processors clearly struggling with the calculations. Unknown, but potentially significant enough to alter galactic power balance. In the ethereal realm of the Mind Collective, Ambassador Silneth was conducting an investigation of her own. The telepathic species had prided themselves on their ability to perceive truth through direct mental contact, but Dr. Chen's revelation had shaken that confidence. Floating within the crystalline thought chambers of her species' homeworld, Silneth connected her consciousness to the vast network that linked every Mindari across the galaxy. The collective memory of her people stretched back over 15,000 years, and if humanity had been concealing their true nature, there should be traces in the psychic interactions they'd recorded. What she found was both fascinating and terrifying. Human thoughts, when examined in aggregate across millennia, showed distinct patterns. The majority of humans genuinely believed the accepted version of their species' history. Their minds carried the authentic emotional signatures of gratitude, curiosity, and humble determination that the Mindari had come to associate with humanity's character. But there were gaps. Subtle discontinuities in the collective human psychic landscape that suggested significant populations who were completely absent from casual telepathic contact. The missing minds numbered in the billions. More unsettling was the discovery of what the Mindari had previously categorized as natural psychic phenomena. Certain regions of space had always been associated with telepathic interference, cosmic background noise that made long-range mental communication difficult. When reanalyzed with the possibility of deliberate shielding in mind, these dead zones formed a pattern that suggested a vast network of psychically protected installations. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not simply hidden their technological capabilities. They had hidden entire populations from telepathic detection for 10,000 years. Silneth's report to the Collective Council was transmitted in the form of pure thought essence, a communication method that allowed no possibility of misunderstanding or misinterpretation. The response from the Council was immediate and unprecedented. For the first time in recorded history, the Mind Collective acknowledged that they had encountered a species capable of systematically deceiving telepathic investigation. Meanwhile, on the war world of Krathos Prime, President General Koth was discovering that his intelligence services had been more thoroughly penetrated than he'd ever imagined possible. The warrior clans had built their reputation on military superiority and strategic intelligence, but the data Dr. Chen had casually displayed suggested that humanity had been monitoring clan activities with disturbing precision. They knew about the Outer Rim expansion before we'd even finished the planning phases, reported Intelligence Chief Vargeth, his scarred features showing the strain of the past week's revelations. The timeline suggests they were aware of our strategic objectives within days of the initial War Council meetings. Koth's massive fists clenched as he studied the evidence. How is that possible? Our security protocols are absolute. Genetic locks, psychic shields, quantum encryption. Unknown, President General. But the evidence is clear. They knew about Operation Deep Strike 3 months before execution. They were aware of the Hegemony Alliance negotiations before we'd made initial contact. They predicted our response to the Commerce Guild trade dispute with 94% accuracy. The warrior clans had always prided themselves on their unpredictability in conflict. The idea that another species had been anticipating their moves for millennia was deeply disturbing on multiple levels. But, perhaps most unsettling was the realization that humanity had known about planned clan operations and had simply watched. They hadn't interfered, hadn't attempted to warn potential targets, hadn't tried to profit from their knowledge. They had simply observed and recorded, as though they were studying an interesting but, ultimately harmless species. On Alteria Prime, High Counselor Velthran was conducting his own private investigation into humanity's claims. The Altarians had maintained detailed records of their first contact with Earth, documents that had been preserved in the sacred archives for 10,000 years. What he found when he reviewed those records with fresh eyes was deeply troubling. The official reports described finding a primitive civilization with basic tool use and early agricultural development. But, buried in the technical appendices were details that had been overlooked for millennia. Energy signatures that had been dismissed as natural phenomena. Structural anomalies that had been attributed to geological activity. Communication signals that had been categorized as random electromagnetic noise. When reanalyzed with the possibility that they were evidence of advanced technology being deliberately concealed, the data told a very different story. The humans the Altarian expedition had encountered were not primitive cave dwellers. They were sophisticated actors playing carefully crafted roles. More disturbing was the discovery that several members of the original contact team had filed supplementary reports expressing doubts about humanity's supposed primitive status. These reports had been archived and, forgotten, dismissed as the paranoid fantasies of explorers who had spent too long in deep space. Now they read like warnings that had gone unheeded for 10,000 years. As the week progressed, similar revelations emerged from intelligence agencies across the galaxy. The Commerce Guild discovered that humanity's supposed technological limitations had been carefully maintained fiction, while their actual capabilities had been systematically concealed. The research-focused academe found that human scientific papers, when reviewed with knowledge of their true capabilities, contained subtle hints of vastly more advanced understanding than they had claimed. Even the Peaceful Federation of Free Worlds uncovered evidence that humanity had been quietly monitoring their internal communications and political developments with precision that suggested intelligence capabilities far beyond what any species had suspected. But, perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected source. The isolated Enigma Collective, a species so reclusive that they rarely participated in galactic affairs, broke their traditional silence to transmit a brief message to the Galactic Council. The message was simple: we confirm human claims. Direct contact established 1,847 years ago. Formal diplomatic relations maintained since. Technology exchange ongoing. Military capabilities exceed public estimates by significant margin. The implications were staggering. While the rest of the galaxy had believed they were dealing with humanity's full capabilities, at least one major power had known the truth for nearly 2 millennia and had chosen to keep that knowledge secret. Dr. Chen received word of the Enigma Collective's confirmation while attending a routine agricultural development meeting on Delta Station. Her reaction was noted by several observers, a slight smile and a barely audible comment that sounded like right on schedule. When questioned about her response by concerned delegates, she simply replied, "Oh, I'm not surprised. The Enigma Collective are excellent at keeping secrets. We've learned a great deal from them about patience and timing." The casual way she acknowledged a nearly 2,000-year-old covert diplomatic relationship sent fresh shockwaves through the galactic community. How many other secret alliances existed? How many other species were aware of humanity's true nature? As the 7-day recess period drew to a close, it became clear that the upcoming council session would be unlike any in galactic history. The fundamental assumptions about power, politics, and civilization that had guided galactic affairs for millennia were crumbling. Intelligence agencies across the galaxy were frantically reassessing every interaction they'd ever had with humanity. Military strategists were recalculating threat assessments and defensive capabilities. Diplomatic corps were trying to determine how to negotiate with a species that had demonstrated the ability to maintain galaxy-wide deceptions for 10,000 years. But, perhaps most significantly, species that had based their entire identity on their technological or cultural superiority were being forced to confront the possibility that they had been, at best, equals with humanity all along, and, at worst, had been subtly managed and manipulated by a species they had considered inferior. The return session would bring together representatives who no longer knew what they were dealing with, to negotiate with humans who had just revealed that everything the galaxy thought it knew about them had been carefully constructed fiction. Dr. Chen spent the final evening of the recess period in her quarters aboard the station, reviewing reports from Earth and the hidden colonies about global reaction to the revelation. The news had been received with everything from celebration to concern to carefully controlled panic. But, overall, humanity was ready. They had spent 10,000 years preparing for this moment, and, now that it had arrived, they were committed to seeing it through. As she prepared for sleep, Dr. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult negotiations, and, probably a few threats. But, after 10 millennia of playing a role, humanity was finally ready to be itself. The galaxy was about to discover what that actually meant. The council chamber had never felt more electric with tension. Representatives from 46 species filled the crystalline hall, but the atmosphere was fundamentally different from the commemorative ceremony that had taken place exactly 1 week earlier. Gone was the casual confidence of established power structures. In its place sat a careful wariness, as species that had considered themselves masters of galactic politics tried to navigate a completely altered landscape. Dr. Chen entered precisely on time, carrying the same diplomatic case she'd brought to every session for the past 30 years. Her appearance was unremarkable as always, but now every delegate in the room was acutely aware that her unassuming exterior concealed depths they were only beginning to understand. High Counselor Velthran called the session to order, his ancient voice carrying a weight that seemed heavier than usual. We reconvene to address the claims made by the human delegation regarding their species' true history and capabilities. Each major power has had opportunity to conduct verification and analysis. He paused, scanning the assembled delegates. Who will speak first? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Commander Grex 9 of the Hegemony activated his vocal processors. Our analysis confirms the accuracy of human claims within acceptable probability ranges. Evidence suggests systematic concealment of technological capabilities, population centers, and military assets over a period consistent with stated timeline. President General Koth leaned forward in his massive chair. The warrior clans acknowledge that humanity has demonstrated intelligence-gathering capabilities that exceed our previous assessments. Their knowledge of classified clan operations suggests surveillance networks of unprecedented sophistication. Ambassador Silnath spoke for the Mind Collective, her silver eyes troubled. We have confirmed the existence of psychically shielded human populations numbering in the billions. The scope of telepathic countermeasures implies research and development far beyond what we believed possible for any non-telepathic species. One by one, the major powers offered their grudging confirmations. The evidence was too overwhelming to deny. Humanity had indeed maintained a galaxy-spanning deception for 10,000 years. When the formal confirmations were complete, High Counselor Velthran turned to Dr. Chen. The Council acknowledges the accuracy of your historical claims. The question before us now is how galactic civilization proceeds with this new information. Dr. Chen stood slowly, her movements precise and controlled. When she spoke, her voice carried the same calm certainty it always had, but now the delegates understood they were hearing from someone who represented a major galactic power rather than a grateful client species. Thank you, High Counselor. Before we discuss the future, I think it's important that you understand why we chose to reveal ourselves now, after so many millennia of concealment. She activated a new holographic display, showing what appeared to be a detailed analysis of current galactic politics. The image revealed a complex web of tensions, alliance structures, economic pressures, and military buildups that painted a picture of a civilization approaching a critical juncture. For the past 600 years, we've been observing an accelerating deterioration in galactic stability, Dr. Chen explained. The major powers have been maneuvering toward what our analysts project as an inevitable large-scale conflict. Trade wars escalating into economic warfare. Border disputes becoming militarized. Alliance structures becoming increasingly rigid and adversarial. The display showed projection models that carried an ominous implication. Without intervention, galactic civilization was heading toward its first major interspecies war in over 5,000 years. We realized that our continued concealment was actually contributing to the problem, Dr. Chen continued. Our withdrawal from active participation has left a power vacuum that the major species have been attempting to fill through increasingly aggressive means. The balance of power that has maintained peace for millennia is breaking down. Trade Coordinator Vel 9 of the Commerce Guild shifted nervously in her crystalline chair.
You're suggesting that humanity's hidden status has destabilized galactic politics?
I'm stating it directly, Dr. Chen replied. When a significant galactic power removes itself from active participation in maintaining stability, other powers inevitably attempt to expand their influence to fill the gap.
The result is exactly what we've been observing.
Increased competition, heightened tensions, and a steady drift toward open conflict. She gestured, and the display shifted to show alternative projection models. These painted a significantly different picture, one where galactic stability was maintained through a more complex balance of power that included humanity as an active participant. Our projections indicate that revealing our true status and resuming active participation in galactic affairs will restore the balance necessary to maintain long-term peace, Dr. Chen explained.
But only if the existing powers are willing to accept us as equals rather than attempting to suppress or eliminate what they perceive as a new threat. The implications were clear. Humanity wasn't just revealing themselves for their own benefit.
They were positioning themselves as a stabilizing force in galactic politics, but they were also making it clear that attempts to suppress them would have consequences. President General Koth stood abruptly, his massive frame radiating the barely controlled aggression that had made him legendary among the warrior clans. You speak of balance and stability, but you've admitted to possessing military capabilities that exceed known parameters.
How do we know this isn't simply a sophisticated pretext for conquest?
Dr. Chen's expression became thoughtful, as though she was considering the question seriously rather than taking offense at the implied accusation.
That's a fair question, President General.
Our response is simple: we've had the capability to attempt conquest for 8,000 years.
If that was our intention, would we have waited until now to reveal ourselves?
She activated another display, showing what appeared to be comparative military analyses. The numbers were sobering.
If humanity's claims were accurate, they had possessed overwhelming military superiority over the combined galactic powers for millennia.
The Krex Empire attempted to conquer humanity 8,000 years ago, Dr. Chen continued. They possessed technology and military capabilities comparable to the current major powers.
We eliminated them completely within 8 years.
Since then, our capabilities have continued to develop while maintaining complete concealment.
The cold logic was undeniable.
If humanity had wanted to conquer the galaxy, they could have done so at any point over the past 8 millennia. Ambassador Silnath leaned forward, her telepathic abilities focused intently on Dr. Chen.
Your surface thoughts continue to project calm rationality, but there's something else. A sense of protective concern? You're not just managing galactic politics.
You're trying to protect us from something. Dr. Chen's smile became genuinely warm for the first time since the sessions began.
Very perceptive, Ambassador. Yes, there is something else. Our long-range exploration efforts have detected concerning developments in distant galactic regions.
The display shifted to show star maps that extended far beyond the local galactic arm. Red markers appeared at various points, indicating threats that were apparently approaching from outside known space. The Devourers, Dr. Chen said simply. A collective entity that systematically consumes technological civilizations. Our deep space monitoring networks detected their scouts approximately 200 years ago. Based on their expansion patterns, they'll reach the edge of known space within the next 500 years.
The chamber fell into absolute silence. The concept of an external threat to galactic civilization was so outside normal experience that most delegates struggled to process the implications. Our analysis indicates that current galactic civilization, fragmented and prone to internal conflict, would be unable to mount an effective defense against a threat of this magnitude, Dr. Chen continued. A unified response will be necessary, but that requires the kind of political stability that seems to be deteriorating. High Counselor Velthran found his voice first. You're claiming to protect us from a threat we didn't even know existed?
We're offering to share the burden of protecting galactic civilization, Dr. Chen corrected. The Devourers represent a threat that no single species could face alone, regardless of their capabilities.
But a truly unified galactic civilization, with all species contributing their unique strengths, could mount an effective defense.
She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. That's why we chose to reveal ourselves now. Not because we seek dominion over galactic affairs, but because we believe galactic civilization is worth preserving, and it cannot be preserved by powers that are drifting toward conflict with each other.
Commander Grex 9's optical sensors dimmed as his processors worked through the strategic implications. You're proposing a fundamental restructuring of galactic governance. Moving from the current Confederation model to something approaching true unity. Dr. Chen nodded. We're proposing that galactic civilization grow up, Commander. For 10,000 years, we've watched species jockey for position, compete for resources, and maintain the kind of adolescent power structures that might have been appropriate when the galaxy was being explored and settled. But those structures are no longer adequate for the challenges we're going to face. She gestured, and the display showed a new organizational chart. Rather than the current system of major powers dominating smaller species, it showed a structure where each species contributed according to their strengths and capabilities. Humans don't want to dominate galactic civilization, Dr. Chen explained. We want to participate in it as equals. But that requires everyone else to abandon the fiction that technological advancement is the only measure of a species' value, and the assumption that newer species should automatically defer to older ones. Trade Coordinator Vel 9 spoke with obvious nervousness. The economic implications of restructuring galactic governance will be managed carefully and equitably, Dr. Chen interrupted. We're not proposing to overturn existing economic structures overnight. We're suggesting a gradual transition to a more collaborative model that reduces competition between species while maximizing the collective strength of galactic civilization. She activated a new display showing economic projections that were frankly staggering. The numbers suggested that a truly unified galactic economy could achieve productivity levels that exceeded the sum of current individual species' outputs. When species stop competing with each other and start collaborating effectively, everyone benefits, Dr. Chen explained. Our economic models suggest that even the species that currently hold dominant positions would see significant improvements in their overall prosperity under a more cooperative system. President General Koth had been studying the military projections with obvious concern. These devourers, how do you know they can be defeated? Dr. Chen's expression became grim. We don't. Our projections suggest that a unified galactic civilization would have approximately a 60% chance of successful defense. Those aren't comfortable odds, but they're significantly better than the 12% chance we project for a fragmented galaxy engaged in internal conflicts. The mathematics were stark and undeniable. Galactic civilization's survival prospects improved dramatically with unity, but even unified, they would be facing a difficult fight. What we can offer, Dr. Chen continued, is our complete commitment to that defense. Humanity's hidden capabilities, our technology, our military assets, our intelligence networks. Everything we've developed over 10,000 years of concealment is available to support galactic civilization's defense. She paused, scanning the faces of delegates who were struggling to absorb the magnitude of what they were hearing. But that offer is contingent on galactic civilization demonstrating that it's worth defending. We won't commit our resources to protecting a galaxy that's intent on tearing itself apart. High Counselor Velthran stood slowly, his ancient frame carrying the weight of a decision that would shape the future of galactic civilization. You're asking us to transform everything about how galactic politics functions. To abandon power structures that have maintained stability for millennia. To trust a species that has admitted to deceiving us for 10,000 years. Dr. Chen met his gaze steadily. I'm asking you to grow up, High Counselor. To recognize that the challenges facing galactic civilization require responses that go beyond traditional politics. To acknowledge that survival sometimes requires fundamental change. The silence that followed was profound. 46 species sat contemplating a choice that none of them had expected to face. Accept humanity as an equal partner and work toward unprecedented galactic unity, or maintain existing power structures while facing an unknown external threat with a divided civilization. Finally, Ambassador Silneth spoke, her voice carrying the weight of telepathic certainty. The sincerity of your commitment is genuine. You truly believe that galactic civilization can be unified and that such unity is necessary for survival. Dr. Chen nodded. I do. Humanity does. We've spent 10,000 years studying galactic civilization, learning about each species' capabilities and contributions. We believe that together, we can build something greater than any of us could achieve alone. President General Koth stood again, but this time his posture suggested contemplation rather than aggression. The warrior clans will need to discuss this proposal extensively. The implications for our military doctrines, our territorial claims, our alliance structures. Of course, Dr. Chen agreed. We don't expect immediate decisions. This is the beginning of a process, not the conclusion. But, it is a beginning that we hope will lead to something unprecedented in galactic history. High Counselor Velfran looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who were all grappling with the same fundamental question. Could they trust each other enough to build the kind of unified civilization that humanity was proposing? This session is adjourned, he announced finally. Each delegation will return to their governments to discuss these proposals. We will reconvene in one standard month to begin formal negotiations. As the delegates began to file out, many paused to look at Dr. Chen with new eyes. She was no longer the grateful pupil accepting guidance from superior civilizations. She was a representative of a major galactic power, offering partnership on terms of equality. Dr. Chen remained in her seat as the chamber emptied, reviewing notes on a personal device. When only she and High Counselor Velfran remained, the ancient Altarian approached her slowly. Was there ever a chance that you would have remained hidden? He asked quietly. If the galaxy had remained stable, if the external threat hadn't emerged, would humanity have revealed itself? Dr. Chen looked up from her device, considering the question seriously. Perhaps not in my lifetime, she admitted. But, eventually, yes. Concealment was always a temporary strategy. Humanity is naturally curious, naturally inclined toward exploration and interaction. We wouldn't have been able to hide forever, nor would we have wanted to. She stood and gathered her materials. The difference is that revealing ourselves now gives galactic civilization a chance to adapt and grow stronger. Revealing ourselves during a crisis would have been much more disruptive. Velfran nodded slowly. And, if the Council rejects your proposals? If we choose to maintain existing power structures despite the external threat? Dr. Chen's expression became sad but determined. Then, humanity will do what we've always done, High Counselor. We'll adapt, survive, and protect what we can. But, we'd much rather do it as part of something larger than ourselves. As she walked toward the exit, Velfran called after her one last time. The galaxy is about to change forever, isn't it? Dr. Chen paused at the doorway and looked back with a smile that carried 10,000 years of patience and hope. The galaxy has been changing forever, High Counselor. We're just finally ready to help guide the change towards something better. The door closed behind her, leaving the chamber empty except for the soft glow of the crystalline walls and the weight of decisions that would reshape galactic civilization. Outside, 46 species began the difficult process of imagining a future that none of them had expected, but all of them might need to survive. Humanity, after 10 millennia of careful observation, was finally ready to help build that future. The age of hidden watchers was over. The age of galactic unity was about to begin.